magnitude 6.1 on the west coast in Oregon near Bandon. So everyone who hears this is like, first, is this the big one? Is this the Cascadia Fault rupturing? Is this a foreshock? How bad is this? Well, I am, and usually you are if you watch my channel on a regular basis. We're careful with that moment because we know there are some other fracture zones, especially if we go in the area of Southern Oregon, Northern California. I mean, there is some danger there, a lot of danger. We do have the Cascadia Fault there, but is this the Cascadia Fault? This, if you look at the epicenter here, let's have a look. So you see there is the blue dot. Now the USGS has it as magnitude 6.0 and they say it's a depth of 10 kilometers. That's usually where they start out and then they adjust this later on. I have seen some report that says 7 kilometers. So that's still shallow. That's roughly 5.9 miles. But as you can see, if we zoom out a little bit from here, you can see the lines. So this is California. This is Northern California. We have Southern Oregon near Bandon here. This red line that you see here is the bad culprit. That's the Cascadia Fault, the subduction zone. And then this here, what we see, this is the Bandon Fracture Zone. And we've had quite a few earthquakes there recently. I have reported live on location for you there. And how bad is this? What does this mean? You can even see here, if we zoom in these aerial pictures, you can see how fractured the seafloor is here. And then many say, wow, Axel Seamount, that underwater volcano that is as big as Manhattan, is it nearby? Well, that's more like close to Lincoln City. That is not going to be affected by this earthquake. I can tell you this. Cascadia Fault here. Well, we have to talk about that. So the epicenter here, we will see how many aftershocks we will see in the near future. How dangerous is that fracture zone? Well, the city of Bandon on the Oregon coast is directly on this major fault line. And it's also, of course, near significant offshore seismic areas. The Blanco Fracture Zone, this is how it's called, is active, as we can see, and it causes frequent smaller earthquakes. We've seen this year, no, not this year, it's 2026 already. Gosh, time flies, guys. Last year, magnitude 5 earthquakes, 4 earthquakes, of course, so close to the massive Cascadia subduction zone. And guys, this is what it is. There's a lot of studies out there about the San Andreas Fault, for example, that has a wide branch of system of other faults going there. Yes, if other faults in the area of a big fault are shaking big enough, they can trigger something that's locked and loaded. So that's always a possibility. That, I mean, magnitude 6 is in the higher range. It could do something to the Cascadia Fault. We can never rule that out. So let's be careful. So Cascadia subduction zone, I don't think we need an introduction for this. This is this massive, massive subduction zone, which poses a long-term risk for a huge megathrust earthquake and tsunami. And it will impact all the West Coast with severe shaking and large waves. Earthquakes that are felt in Bandon often, many of them originate from the Blanco Fracture Zone. But of course, the major concern is the Cascadia Fault. There's key fault zones near Bandon. The Blanco Fracture Zone is an offshore fault system. As you can see here, the red lines. Tectonic plates are not like the Cascadia Fault, that is a subduction zone. Plates are subducting underneath each other. The Blanco Fracture Zone is basically when plates slide horizontally. It's producing common moderate earthquakes that are felt on the Oregon coast, and thankfully, usually they do not trigger tsunamis. So what are the earthquakes doing there? What's the risk for Bandon and the coast there? We do have frequent earthquakes there in the Blanco Fracture Zone. Recent, magnitude 5, magnitude 6. So this is not out of range. It's not like we're like, oh, we've never seen this before. Something bad is going to happen. I don't think so. Let's keep our minds calm for now and just watch what's happening. I expect aftershocks. So far, nothing else should happen. Of course, high impact threat Cascadia Subduction Zone has a less frequent rupture cycle or earthquake cycle than the Bandon Fracture Zone, and it has a potential for severe shaking. We're talking like 5 to 8 minutes, even more here, and a large tsunami impact on the coast. So Blanco Fracture Zone, I don't expect any tsunami, any problems in this area. So the faults are connecting there. That's why you see this zigzag basically there. That is, well, the zigzag is going parallel to the Cascadia Fault. And Blanco Fracture Zone is active, and we can also call this horizontal movement a right lateral transform fault system. And it's connecting the Juan de Fuca Ridge and the Gorda Ridge that you see here on the map. So it is a plate boundary. So let's not forget that. It marks the boundary between the Pacific Plate and the Juan de Fuca Plate. And it also has earthquake swarms quite often, not these isolated larger events. It also shows cluster swarms. So if we see that there, it's also not like that we need to fall into panic right away. But, you know, I recently reported about this by coincidence. Scientists that were looking in that area, Blanco Fracture Zone, Juan de Fuca Plate, they wanted to do some research there, take some samples from the seafloor, and then for some reason their navigation was wrong. They ended somewhere else, and they found evidence after they looked at that, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, what the heck is happening there? What's going on? They discovered that they were in the area, Cascadia Fault and San Andreas Fault, and they found evidence that San Andreas Fault and Cascadia trigger each other and have so in the past. What a mess, guys, because that would wipe out the whole West Coast as we know it for Cascadia Fault shortly after San Andreas Fault, or vice versa. If we thought, okay, yeah, if the big one happens, California could come to help, right? Because all of the coast will be destroyed, most likely on the West Coast. We're talking like Victoria, Vancouver Island, Vancouver, British Columbia. We're talking cities like Bellingham, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia. We're talking about Portland, Salem, all these cities. So where's help coming from? This is going to be a big, huge disaster already. But let's imagine San Andreas Fault comes as well. Oopsie, Northern California, San Francisco, LA, down to San Diego. I just reported this morning we had a powerful 4.4 earthquake where the San Andreas Fault is locked and loaded right now in Southern California in the San Diego area, Salton Sea, where scientists say, well, there it's locked and loaded the most, so it could start triggering there. So the whole West Coast would be wiped out. But let's imagine like a small fault system, well, not small, but side branches trigger one, and that triggers the next one, and that triggers the next one. I don't even want to think about it, guys. I live on the West Coast. It's a scary, scary thought, but it's not a theory anymore with San Andreas Fault and Cascadia, because they have evidence. If you're interested in that, it's really, really cool to see it. Cool, scary to see it. The thumbnail is this one, wiped out. It's in the end screen. Check it really out. So we have the boundary between the Pacific Plate and the Juan de Fuca Plate, where we have this magnitude 6.1-ish earthquake that just happened here. The seafloor, we have distinct features there, like lots of ridges and troughs, because the slates are sliding there past each other horizontally. Why is this not a danger? Why don't we have tsunamis or major onshore damage from these, or especially here, the Bandon Fracture Zone? Because due to the nature of the fault, we call this a warm, young fracture zone. They do add strain, though, to the nearby Cascadia Fault Zone. They just do. So the Blanco Fracture Zone extends northwest from the Gorda Ridge to the Juan de Fuca Ridge, about 170 miles off the coast of Oregon. And it connects these spreading centers. We call them ridges, where basically new oceanic crust forms, and that acts as a boundary between tectonic plates. And again, I want to talk about this again. It can increase, and that's scientifically proven, the strain on the Cascadia Fault, on the southern end of the Cascadia Fault. Cascadia Fault doesn't have to rupture as a whole, by the way. It could be that just the southern end triggers, or the mid end, or the northern end near Vancouver. Latest research that I was hearing is like northern end is more at risk. Shizzy's going to hit the fizzy there first, but who knows? This is just vague prediction. We don't have enough information about that. So guys, this is what's happening there. I'll keep a look at you for aftershocks or anything else. Check out the videos here on the end screen if you want to know what's happening elsewhere. Thank you so much for watching. Hey, it would be great if you could give a like, a hype, and subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. Helps my channel. Thank you so much, guys. Be prepared. Stay safe. See you here in the next one. Bye-bye.